Liftoff will start in T-minus 10 seconds.
Hey everybody, this is Evan and John, and you're listening to the Boomer and X Show.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Boomer and X Show, and thank you for joining us. We're back. It's been a long hiatus.
Nah, it's just yesterday.
No, it was a long hiatus.
What was about a month maybe, huh?
And then some.
Okay.
Yeah, and then some. Well, we recorded an episode before the Super Bowl, although we talked about other things other than the Super Bowl.
The election, right? That was our last
one.
Well, the election process.
The process, yeah. And there has certainly been a lot that has gone on along those lines since we last did a show.
Definitely.
The first week of February. And we're going to talk about some of that. And we are also going to have a conversation about global warming.
That's the ultimate topic today.
Yeah, because there's been a lot come out in the past several months about that. So we're going to address it.
And that's one of the issues, we said while we cover the election, the political issues is we'll kind of hit them also. And that's one of them.
It is. It is one. Although you couldn't tell it by watching the debates. Hand size has gotten more conversation than global warming. But we're going to try to actually stay away from the politics of it and talk about science.
Yes.
And since I have a scientific background and actually in wind weather, and then
I took a science class once, so I'm qualified.
So we will talk about that, but before we get into our topics, let's just kind of shoot the breeze a little bit about what's been going on with us in the past month.
You took a trip.
I took a trip. I took Mardi Gras week off, and instead of celebrating Mardi Gras, I headed north.
Yeah, Yankee.
I went to visit some friends / experience winter in Michigan. And had a blast. I would like to thank my hostess, Pat, for giving me a place to crash while I was there. And I would like to thank my tour guide, Janet.
They're both listeners, right?
Yes.
Cool. Hey, y'all.
And Janet for taking me around and helping me get some good photographs and enjoying myself.
Pictures too.
Yeah.
Was it a video? Yeah, it was a video of you getting splashed by the waves, huh?
Yeah. So here's what was one thing that I thought was very interesting and fun, and I know most people will say, well, that sounds like the last thing in the world that would be fun.
Yeah, a lot of people would say that. But continue.
Yeah, we went hiking, and we went. It's about a 3.5 mile round trip hike.
Okay, hiking 3 mile round trip. How cold was it?
Temperature was in the upper teens.
Okay, yeah,
and it was windy, and there was a little bit of snow falling where we were, right there along the lake shore. So it was about a 3.5 mile round trip hike. We get up to the lighthouse. Kind of was.
It was an ice house.
It was an ice house. And we get up to the lighthouse and going out and standing by the shore, and you can see the ice all over the grass and the structure there, the fog horn shelter, and you see it, but not all waves crashing on shore are created equal. Some go high up and come farther inland, some less so. But anyway, I was standing there among grass that was covered with ice, but none of the waves over the last couple of minutes had come up there. All of a sudden, a big one hits. It comes up, it splashes, water goes up in the air and lands on me and instantaneously freezes on my clothing, my coat, my pants.
And remember, y'all, he said this was fun.
This was fun.
So,
and so I note to my hiking buddy and tour guide and friend that, hey, look at this. I am now wearing part of Lake Michigan. A couple of minutes later, another wave hits, splash, spray goes up in the air, falls down on me, lands, and instantaneously freezes. And as weird as this will seem, it wasn't cold. It wasn't cold because I actually wasn't getting wet.
Oh, I guess so. Yeah.
It was freezing so fast that I wasn't getting wet. Now my clothing was becoming stiff. My pants, my coat, it was all becoming stiff because it was getting coated with ice. And had I chosen to stand there for an hour or so, I probably would have gotten so coated with ice that I couldn't have moved. Yeah,
like in the movies.
Well, like you see, I remember seeing several weeks ago a picture of a car parked near Lake Erie, and it had sat there overnight and become so obviously
of ice,
with maybe a foot and a half thick or so. So obviously I moved before that happened. But then when we got back to her Jeep and started going to another location, well, we were in a warm car, and then the ice melted, and then I became wet.
So when you drove up there, and I get a little weather alert. I was tracking you as you were driving.
Right.
And I guess northern Illinois into Michigan.
Yes.
There was a winter storm warning.
Yeah.
And any normal person, that would just ruin their trip.
Right.
I was like, I bet John's like a kid in the candy store. And you call me when you get to your hotel, and you're like, dude, there's a winter storm in effect on top of me. And I was like, yeah, I know.
Well, and that's why when I decided to take the time off, I knew I was going to do one of two things. I was either going to go out west to the Rockies, or I was going to go north to the Great Lakes. And it just so happened that there was a prolonged setup for lake effect snow that was going to be going on. So I knew that I was going to get to experience some winter. We've had absolutely none along the Gulf Coast here this year.
I think it got down to 30 one day.
Yeah, we had a couple of freezing mornings, I think. But, certainly in terms of any kind of wintry precipitation.
No, nothing.
Nothing at all. So, and again, it was great to go visit friends. These are the same people. These are among the same people that I see when I go up there in July. Of course, in July,
it's July.
Well, and everybody gathers. I only saw the ones that live there all the time. I didn't see the ones that come in from other places but I'll see them in July. But anyway,
Super Bowl.
Yeah, I left right after the Super Bowl, which I watched at your place, and I left and did an overnight drive, which a lot of people also think is
that's also pretty
crazy thing. But I am a night owl, and I figure why not get my miles driven at night. So when I left your place at 11 o'clock here in Lafayette, Louisiana, Sunday night, I spent Monday night in Kankakee, Illinois, about an hour south of Chicago. So
that'll do it.
Yep. So the Super Bowl. You were right.
I was. I don't know if we did score or anything, but I know I said Broncos a win, and that was a heart decision totally. Because mentally looking at stats and stuff, you would say not. I do remember saying one thing. I named two guys, Von Miller and Ware, and the defense was the superstars. Von Miller got MVP, and so I was glad to see that they did to Cam Newton what they did to Tom Brady.
They did, so, and I didn't think they would. I mean, I was wrong. I said several times that I had over the course of the year become very impressed in Cam Newton's skill set and the way he was carrying his team. But I tell you what, this was a classic unstoppable force meets unmovable object. And the unmovable object won.
Well, I think you hear was it 85 Chicago Bears?
85 Bears was a great defense.
And I know this is the best defense I've ever seen in my life.
I agree.
I was born in 89.
I agree. And also when you look at the era that football is in now with scoring and passing, and it's just a much more offensive game now. And when you look at what that Denver defense did for Pittsburgh, and then what they did to New England, and then what they did to Carolina. Yeah. And 3 games in a row, amazing defensive performances, really. So hats off to not only the defensive player, but Wade Phillips, the defensive coordinator. I mean, my goodness. And, he's done a stint as a head coach. It didn't go well. If I remember correctly, it was with the Buffalo Bills. But man, oh man, as a defensive coordinator, you have got to hand it to him and to his players.
I'm sure he'll be getting a good raise.
I would think so. Because they definitely shut it down.
So that being old news, the Super Bowl,
Sure.
Denver Broncos won. New news, I guess we could talk about.
Yeah.
Is Peyton Manning finally said he's retired.
Yeah.
And why not, man? The dude's as on top as you can be.
He is, and he didn't put himself there either.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
So,
he still and when the record books are all there, he still gets 2 rings.
Yeah.
That's still part of the
He still
conversation
goes
as
to the Hall
to
of
his
Fame.
place. Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly his place
but
in history.
If you take his 2015 season, trash.
Yeah.
So
and
all
which was
defense.
worse than 14, which was worse than 13.
Yeah,
so what
Exactly.
Why what
not
was going to
retire?
make 16 be good?
Only
Nothing.
money.
Yeah, and
And
I mean, come on. He's made more money
Yeah.
off of damn Papa
Yeah.
John's.
Yep.
Oh, and I could have done without the 17 Bud Light references right after.
There was 3. maybe only 2. I think he owns a Anheuser-Busch place though.
It was kind of, I could have done.
It was
that.
either that or Disney World.
I can't. Well, either one. Oh, and speaking of after, and then this is something we talked about as we were watching and the game was going on, and we were kind of talking about Cam Newton's antics, and we said, look, you can look, if you can win and enjoy winning,
Yeah.
then that's one thing, but let's see if you lose how you handle it. Well, he didn't handle it. He didn't.
Well, he tried to lose it there for a second, and then he.
No, but after the game, he did lose. He got up and walked out of the post game.
They were unfair to the guy. I mean, he had Von Miller talking about their strategy and how it worked so good on him.
That's life.
Man,
That's
they
life.
never do that though. They never do that.
He didn't win himself any friends or fans.
No, but I dare you to sit through what he was sitting through. I'm on Cam Newton's side here. I mean, if you just lost the Super Bowl, the biggest game in your life, and you got a guy right here saying, essentially talking smack.
Well, okay, but Cam's been talking smack all year.
Yeah, but I mean,
well, he didn't win any fans. And as I had sort of gotten to be in his corner during the course of the season, now I have to say that didn't look so good.
it didn't bug me that much. I mean, given the circumstances, he had a guy right here talking about how their game plan worked and everything.
So now that Manning is leaving, are they going to turn it over to the Rottweiler?
I don't think they are. I think they're looking at
Is RG3 maybe?
Nah, I think they're looking at Menzel.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
See, I saw something yesterday.
Even Jerry Jones has come out and said, no.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I don't know who they're looking. I don't see. I think it's kind of still up in the air if Osweiler's getting re-signed. I do know also someone else retired today.
Who?
Calvin Johnson.
Okay. Well, he had been talking about it.
Yep. So, Megatron's gone. Beast Mode's gone. Peyton Manning. I don't know if he has a nickname. I see an era of football changing. With not just those 3 guys, but just a wave of new players coming through.
Well, it's certainly Manning had an era. Definitely. Calvin Johnson / Megatron, okay, he had an era, less than Manning, but he had an era. Beast Mode didn't.
I'm not throwing him in there,
Beast
but
Mode didn't have an era. He
I guess just with all these guys leaving, but mostly Peyton Manning and Calvin Johnson. Yeah, I see a change. This year, you mentioned RG3. A lot of people are looking for quarterbacks right now, and I think RG3's kind of sitting pretty because not much out there right now in college or in the NFL. So
right. Well, we'll see.
Just my 2 cents on RG3.
He definitely needed a change of scenery.
He's got some growing up to do, and I think this is a humbling experience for him.
If he learns from it.
I mean, if he took a team that no one thought as far as he did his rookie year.
I know.
He's still that same guy.
I know. I don't think he is, though.
I think he is.
I don't think physically he is. I believe they mishandled him when he was injured and prone to being injured worse than he was, and I'll be surprised. Pleasantly so, but I'll be surprised if he is ever the player he was and when he was in that rookie year.
All right, so we moving on. We were talking about politics, and our last one was just a general election process. No know
No
nobody's
specifics.
names.
Well, we did mention that we thought that
Oh, we did kinda get into
Chris Christie and Jeb Bush would
drop.
exit, and
we didn't. You did.
I did.
That was pretty good.
They both left a little earlier than I thought they would.
Yeah.
But those were the two I said would get out.
And
Since then, Ben Carson has left as well.
Something I did not think of until I was in the booth voting was that they suspend when they drop out, they just stop the campaign. You can still vote for them.
Right.
I wanted to say that on that episode, and I didn't think about it till I saw. Oh, and something funny, a Louisiana governor's name was not on there to vote for. Why would that be if everyone else who had dropped that is?
And that is kind of this past Saturday we had a primary here in Louisiana.
Yep. Donald Trump won and Hillary Clinton won.
And Hillary Clinton won. I am a registered Democrat, so I could only vote Democrat. You're a registered Republican, so you could only vote Republican.
And I actually tried. You can't.
Okay. I noticed them. They were sitting there, and
you can't.
I didn't. Yeah. But I did know. But I looked down the Republican names, and I saw Bobby Jindal was not there, and yet Huckabee and Rick Santorum, and they were all there, and yet Bobby Jindal was not there. I just thought that was hilarious.
Yeah. Do you have any?
I don't know. No, because I think you have to petition to be on each state's ballot.
Why would he not be on his own?
I don't know.
I bet it has something to do with the state he left it in, and it would just show more. It would show more numbers.
Well, it might have been, but, look, can you do this? Can you pick up and you call the office of whoever runs the primary and say, look, nobody's going to vote for me and I'm out of it, so can you just take my name off of there because it's going to suck? First of all,
sure you can.
Jindal's still running around talking and giving advice like he doesn't realize he sucked, so I don't think that's it. I just thought it was very comical that his name wasn't there.
I did too. I expected to see it, and I wanted just to see the numbers on how he did in his own state.
Yeah, I did too.
Until I saw it wasn't there, I didn't even think. I hadn't seen his name since he's dropped out, but I mean, he had 0.1%.
I don't know
when he did drop out.
Yeah, it was
nothing. Suspended. I need to stop saying that because you don't drop out. You're suspending your campaign.
Well, he might have
dropped
out because his name wasn't there.
I guess you can drop out.
So, and I remember we kind of talked about the Trump phenomenon, and I don't even remember how much we talked about on the show, but I just know conversations between you and myself. And I said this. I think this Trump thing has some legs, but I believe he's got a very high floor. But I think he's got a relatively low ceiling.
I think you said that on the last episode too.
The ceiling is turning out to be higher than I thought it was.
51% higher.
I will be utterly shocked, dismayed, and packing my bags for Canada if that happens.
They don't have it any better.
Yeah, they will.
Hey, Canada, I like y'all too.
So this phenomenon, this Trump thing, first of all, let's talk about what it's doing to the Republican Party and where it might lead come convention time. I'm on record as saying he will not be the Republican nominee, and although it looks like I'm wrong, I'm going to stay with it until I'm wrong. I'm not going to give up on that prediction.
And you did say you still think he might go independent.
If he doesn't get it, he will. Yeah. He will get his name out there, and he will run. And he will, run a very significant race, just like Ross Perot did in 1992,
and split the vote,
and split the Republican vote,
is,
and therefore Bill Clinton, ends up president of the United States.
That might be how we get another Clinton in.
It could be.
That'd be crazy.
It could be.
Maybe. Now, remember I said, I do believe I said on the last one, where's the punch? You said, where's the punchline? And I
keep saying, where's the Trump punchline?
Maybe it's a ploy from the Democratic side to get him to run to split a vote because he's got the money, or anyways, I don't know. Maybe they're trying to repeat history the same way.
No, I still think there's a punchline coming, but I have no idea what it is. But aside from that, let's say this thing goes into a convention. The last time there was a convention for one of the major parties, that they went into the convention without a clear winner in delegates was the 1968 Democratic Convention, and they had primaries with Bobby Kennedy and McCarthy, who were running. Well, Robert Kennedy got assassinated. He got assassinated the night he won the California primary. And by the way, in 1968, there were only about 13 primaries. Not all 50 states had primaries back then. So there were delegates that were selected by convention, by voters, but there was also a lot of, quote, back smoky room stuff that was going on.
Well, if they didn't have primary, did they have a caucus then?
No, a lot of them didn't have anything.
Really?
And so you just have this convention where they choose the nominee. Now, it's usually whoever had gotten the most votes in the limited number of primaries.
So the Democratic...
But it's a very different process, even than it was as recently as the late 60s. But in 1968, the Democratic Convention was a mess. It was in Chicago.
Protesting.
A lot of anti-Vietnam War protests. But what happened was the sitting president, Lyndon Johnson, who had finished Kennedy's first term and then had his first term, but since he hadn't had 2 full terms, he was eligible to run again, but chose not to because he was so unpopular because of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And he was also unpopular in the South because of the Civil Rights Act.
Okay.
So he was, unpopular in a lot of ways, but most of the people that were taken to the streets were anti-war protesters. So it got very ugly inside the convention. It got very ugly outside the convention. And the reason I bring this up is because if for some reason the Republicans hold their convention and they do not come out of there with Trump as their candidate, I believe it will get very, very ugly again.
Okay. In the same way, protesting and people getting kicked out and beaten.
Yes. I think it will get very ugly, and it's in Cleveland, I think.
Are the candidates at this convention?
The candidates are certainly the nominee is, and
if there's 3, if there's 2, I guess.
Well, and again, this will be something that hadn't happened since 1968. If we don't go in with a clear winner, and we may go in with a clear winner, but it'll certainly be swimming against the tide because the Republican establishment is doing everything they can to prevent. But it certainly is the most fascinating race I've seen in my lifetime.
Cool. I'm around for it.
And of course, what he's tapping into is
Trump.
Trump. He's tapping into a lot of anger, and let's be honest about it. He's tapping into a good bit of racism
with the Muslim stuff.
Yeah.
You said something the other day how some black protesters were getting kicked out of one of his rallies.
Yeah,
and you mentioned what if that happened to an Obama?
I said to you, I said, what if 8 years ago, if Obama's running and he's using the kind of incendiary language that Trump is using, and his rallies are 99% black. Some white people show up to protest, and he stands up at the podium and he says, "Get them out of here, get them out of here," and he throws them out, and he's egging on people to be very, very physical. And I asked you at the time, what would the reaction of America been? If you flipped this, no,
yeah, sure,
no, it would have been much, much worse than the reaction to the Trump, because look, Trump's numbers haven't gone down any. He is a viable candidate.
Yeah, no matter what comes out, the dude's bulletproof.
I don't think he's going to win, but at this point, you have to call him a viable candidate.
Definitely.
If Obama had conducted himself this way 8 years ago, he would not have been a viable candidate, not by a long shot. I'm just saying.
I know. I have a very short lifetime of political viewing that I've done, and I've never seen anything like it, of stuff of this manner. So, that being said, this was my first primary to vote on. I didn't vote in the primaries when I was first eligible 4 years ago.
So you voted, and you voted for
Rubio.
You voted for Rubio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was torn between Cruz and Rubio.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, until tonight, what was it? Undecided
in Michigan, uncommitted.
Okay, uncommitted.
Yeah,
that's what I would have voted.
Right, and it wasn't on our ballot.
It wasn't. I saw uncommitted. I was like, "Whoa, that's unfair. I didn't have that option." So,
but Michigan did. Speaking of Michigan, it looks like we have an upset winner in the Democratic
with
primary.
Sanders.
It was Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton.
And you said he voted for.
He voted
against
the auto bailout,
and he's winning.
And he's winning in Michigan, which is astounding. Yeah. That's astounding. Yeah. And the polls that they were showing this morning showed her 55-42.
Maybe that just shows how short memories we have.
No, they remember. They remember. But over the coming day, that's going to be the big story coming out of tonight. That will be the big story coming out of tonight. So I am curious to watch in and look and see some analysis of that. But also, you look at where Hillary has won her states, and it's in the South where there is a very, very, very large.
Mississippi was an annihilation.
But she's done that in all of them.
That's true.
Where the vast majority of your Democratic voters in the South are African American.
Okay.
And she is absolutely destroying there. But she also won out in Nevada, and she won a very, 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 hairline victory in Massachusetts. Other than that, she is blanking it in the South. But I mentioned to you, so you look at the states she's winning now, and in the general election, unless there's a split of the Republican-leaning vote by Trump and or somebody else, unless there's a split, but she is not going to win those states in November. She's just not
against Republican.
No. Again, unless two of them split in the vote. Yeah,
that's gonna be interesting.
It is. It is going to be interesting.
So I don't have I've said I don't really put too much into it until I see who our nominee is, and then I go with that. Like I said, Rubio. I don't even remember the numbers. Rubio just got torched in Louisiana,
right?
And then Cruz, and then Trump.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't a big turnout at all. Honestly, when I went, I went at 3 or 4, and they get your license, they write your name down. I was number 100.
Yeah.
I mean,
in your precinct.
In my precinct. Yeah.
I went in the middle of the afternoon, and I didn't see what number I was, but there was nobody else there voting when I went in. Now, when I went for the gubernatorial race back in the autumn and the runoff, it was somewhat busy. There was a little bit of buzz of activity, but no, in the primary, there was nothing on Saturday.
And I saw there's a small town, Cecilia. They got 96 votes.
Really?
I was talking to my boss. Out of them, his family accounted for 7. Him and his son and his.
Well, that's interesting. Somebody in his family ought to run for something.
They could get
mayor of Cecilia.
Cecilia, sure.
So, all right. Well, I asked you who you voted for, so I guess I'll have to fess up and say I voted for Bernie Sanders.
Now you just said in the South states he's not doing too good. What was
he's not doing well at all, huh?
What was the divide on those two here?
A whole bunch to not much. I mean, I don't know, like 85 to 15 or something like that. Or it was it was. As far as my personal, I think he says what he means and means what he says, and I think he's always been the same person, and I like that about him. I like the fact. Look, I like the fact that he voted against the auto bailout.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact he voted against the bank bailout. I like the fact he voted against the Iraq War. I like all of those things. I think that a lot of his proposals with regards to tax and free education for everybody, that's not going to happen. It's pie in the sky stuff. But here are what I think the two main things to vote. I'll say 3. One is national security, and that's really not high on my list, but the reason it's not that high on my list is because I know it's high on enough other people's lists that I don't have to put it high on my list. Yeah. I believe that the growing income inequality is the biggest problem we face here in this country, and this has been going on, let's say, I did some looking at some charts the other day, getting ready for this conversation, and back in the 1960s, the average CEO made roughly 25 times what the average employee makes.
Okay.
Now it's depending on what year, and it's kind of tied. It spikes with regards to the stock market because a lot of compensation is not in cash; it's in stock and options. So it spikes. But now, depending on the year and the economic cycle we're in, it's anywhere from 250 to 400, depending on the source you look at.
Times more?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus.
So, as you can see, and there's something else you and I have talked about. I've talked about when the house I grew up in that was built in 1967 or 68 cost my parents $23,500. That was the house. Mm-hmm. The car we bought, the 1974 Mercury Marquis, that is the size of a yacht and was sitting on the showroom floor, $6,000. So now
that won't even buy you a boat nowadays.
To get a comparable house to that and a comparable car to that, you're probably talking about
$250.
at least 250. Yeah, let's say 250 on the house and 45 on the car. So, 6, 7, 8, 10 times what? And I can tell you this: I'm not making 6, 7, 8, 10 times what either one of my parents made, and you're not either.
I guess what you're getting at is that's the next big war.
Well, I think it is. I think that's what this country is facing, and let me tell you that's what, other than the racist angle, that's what Donald Trump is tapping into. The frustration over the money divide, and that's what Senator Sanders talks about more than anything else, and he talks about that a lot.
So Sanders is the Trump of the Democratic Party?
I think he is. I believe that real protest votes go for those two candidates. Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
I do think that.
But Sanders really isn't tapping into the anger and fear.
No, he's not. No, he's not talking about building walls, and he's not talking about keeping Muslims out of the country, and neither one of. By the way, neither one of those things is going to happen. A wall is not going to be built, and Mexico damn sure isn't going to pay for it. And it's unconstitutional to keep a group of people out of the country based on religion. It's unconstitutional. So that's not going to happen either. So
I stopped saying something won't happen a long time ago because.
Well, if we go,
just think about it. We've got legal gay marriage and marijuana legal in states. Think about how many people said that wouldn't happen. So. I'm not saying it's going to either.
I don't know that either one of those is in direct conflict with the Constitution, though. So I think that the growing disparity between the very rich and powerful and the sinking middle class in this country.
So how does that war take place? Do we just run? To
we might find out this fall with Trump supporters.
But who do you attack? The rich people?
Well,
what is that going to do?
Well, you attack those that have gotten stronger and stronger and stronger and more powerful. That's who you should be angry at. But if you're of a certain mindset, you attack Muslims, you attack somebody that doesn't look like you, someone that doesn't talk like you, and you take your fears out on them.
I saw a funny...
Because let me ask you this: do you think the Jews were the problem in Germany in 1930?
I wasn't there for that, so I don't know.
Germany was in a very bad way post World War I.
Financially,
I guess in every way. Post World War I, they were in a very bad way. So someone comes along and incites this and gets everything going, and we know how that went. And I know that might sound a little off the deep end, but I've seen stuff with these Trump voters and at Trump rallies that I didn't think I would see in political discourse. But we'll see what comes of it.
So I saw it's just a short little video, but it showed, poor guy, middle class guy, rich guy sitting beside each other. Rich guy had a big stack of coins. Middle class had a little stack. Poor guy had hardly one or two coins. So the poor guy asked the middle-aged class guy a question. He turns and looks. The rich guy takes a handful of coins from him. Okay. The middle-class guy turns to the rich guy and starts yelling at him. He goes, "Wasn't me," points at the poor guy. And the middle-class guy starts yelling at the poor guy.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I was like, hey, that's exactly what John was saying.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we're seeing.
So I believe as a country that is our biggest thing, because I don't. And I agree with something that President Obama said about ISIS a couple of months ago, that ISIS does not pose an existential threat to the United States. And I believe that. Does that mean that we are totally and completely impervious to future terrorist attacks? No. But as horrible as 9/11 was, it did not come close to ending this country as, say, 40, 50, 60 million people taking to the streets because they have finally had enough. That's what I'm talking about on a scale. The other thing that I think it poses a threat to this country, but the planet as a whole, is what we're going to be talking about on the back part of this show.
And we can get to that right now if you want to go on our break.
Take a little break.
Yeah, let's take a little break.
Right.
Feel
Okay, so we are back, and we are talking about global warming, right, John?
Yeah, we are. I wanted to ask you a question. Before you and I started talking about it, or I guess maybe more accurately, before I started talking about it and you started listening to me talk about it, how much thought did you give to this topic, if any?
Some, but it was always politically based. I never really thought about the science.
Okay.
And first off, are we calling this climate change or global warming? Which are we going with?
We can call it climate change.
Okay. Because that was one of my questions. It used to be, global warming. Now we're calling it climate change. And is there a reason for that, or did it just start calling
I think that global warming, I don't know, maybe those that are believers in the science of global warming, they may have decided to go with the term climate change because it may have been a little less of a controversial term, but
easier to
it's
absorb,
really
easier.
it's really the same thing. I don't know that. I use them interchangeably personally.
Okay.
So you really, it wasn't something you gave a lot of thought to, and what information you processed about it came from political sources, correct?
No. Oh, before I did this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
When all the stuff I looked at, I made sure to. I did more source checking than anything. Instead of looking at a chart of, because I'm not going to understand the ice, coming and goings,
right.
And I can look at that chart all day and not know. But what I was looking at is who put the chart together, who are they funded by, or stuff like that. Because it does sadly affect the data. So that's kind of what
I don't accept that premise that there are measurements of parameters, and those measurements of those parameters are affected by someone that is funded. For instance, we every day, and I can take you and show you a chart of ice coverage, satellite, observed ice coverage in both the northern and the North Pole and the South Pole.
Yeah,
that's data. That's data. It's calculated the number of square miles that are covered every day. Pictures are taken,
from the satellite.
and that's data. And to say that is, quote, funded by someone, and that's just wrong.
But it is. I'm not saying what you're looking at right there, but there are charts on both sides that show whatever they want it to show. So that's why I first was looking at those things. Both sides will they're trying to prove their side. So I was source checking.
Again, to me, there's not a side when you show ice coverage in 1980 versus 1990 versus 2000 versus 2010.
No, there's not. When you're looking
there's not a
right at
side.
the satellite. But
right.
When you get someone say, from this date to this date it did this, that means this, and then you have the other side say the same thing, but get a totally different.
And that's what I try to
stay away from, and that's exactly what I did.
But
you're finding what I found in this is there is a lot of, I guess, bought science, and I was staying away from those charts. Okay. I'm not forming any questions off of those charts at all.
All right.
Because there's somewhere you got people that are funded by the big oil or WWF, and they're gonna say what those funding people say, and they just are. You're not going to get someone funded by the WWF say, this is all fake.
Well, to keep us from going down that rabbit hole,
that's why I started there.
Yeah, but before we get into what is or is not causing things to change, I wanted to kind of hit a atmospheric circulation 101.
How it works.
How it just works.
Yeah.
How it just works. And first of all, there is a greenhouse effect. And there has to be a greenhouse effect for us to have.
If there
life.
Wasn't, we'd be a ball of ice.
Well, right, and our temperatures would go from very, very hot from wherever the sun is hitting to very, very cold wherever the sun is not hitting. So there is a greenhouse effect The problem, if you accept that there is a problem, and I do, comes in that we are altering the atmosphere in a way that alters the balance of energy in our atmosphere.
In a way that the Earth can't mitigate?
Right, and that's actually a pretty good way to put it. So, first of all, between the two tropics, between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, which are 23.5 degrees either side of the equator,
okay, yeah.
That between those points and the equator is where you have your greatest sunlight hit because of the curvature of the Earth. That's where the most direct rays are coming in. As you go around the curve of the Earth and head toward the top, the North Pole,
mm-hmm.
and the bottom, the South Pole, those areas are getting rays that are coming through more and more of a filtered at an angle, so they're more and more filtered. So without circulation patterns, overall global circulation patterns, you would continue to have the equatorial area between the tropics get hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter because they are always gaining more energy during the daylight hours than they're losing at night.
Without any, you're talking about, what were we
I'm talking about the whole tropical area.
Okay.
Everything in the tropics is always gaining more during the day than it's losing at night. The polar areas, both the south and the north, are always losing more during the dark than they are gaining during the light.
Okay.
And the reason I didn't use day and night there is because day and night is
always aren't day and night.
For the most part, you know, you have, as you get to the poles, you have 6 months of, north of the Arctic Circle. South of that, though, you have, you do have some day and some night all around the year, but it changes a lot. So without circulation patterns, you would have a great imbalance of temperature develop. But we obviously don't, because we have in the northern hemisphere, we have southerly winds taking warm air from the tropical regions poleward to balance things out. A lot of time that warm air comes in the form of tropical cyclones. That's the purpose they serve. They transport heat poleward. And then we have cold fronts come down from the north to take some of that cold from the north and bring it equator.
So that's the jet stream, right?
Well, it's the balance. It's the balance. It's weather. It's changes from day to day, location to location, and that's how we keep things in balance.
Yeah.
Where things are starting to break down is the fact that since the Industrial Revolution, mid 1700s and after, but certainly more over the past 50 to 60 years as more and more usage has come about, we have added carbon dioxide, CO2, to the atmosphere at a very, very, very fast pace, to the point where we have taken, at 1750, we have taken our...
The year 1750?
Yeah, we've taken CO2 concentrations from about 250 parts per million to now over 400 parts per million. And here's why that matters. CO2 absorbs outgoing radiation, and
it's a greenhouse gas.
It's a greenhouse gas, and let me backtrack just a little bit again. As I talked about the circulation patterns during the daylight hours, and most people without a scientific background don't know this, but during the daylight hours, when the sun comes through, it does not heat the atmosphere, because you have short wavelength, very high energy, and the atmosphere can't absorb that.
It goes straight to the ground.
So it goes straight to the ground, and then the ground absorbs some, and it sends the rest back out in a lower energy, longer wavelength, and it heads out to space. It heads out to space until it's intercepted by a couple of different things. One is water vapor, which absorbs, and one is CO2, which absorbs at these longer, lower energy wavelengths. It is the imbalance that we have created over the past, again, at an increasing rate over the past couple of hundred years, that is creating the problems, and has altered the Earth's ability to do what it needs to do, especially in these snow-covered, high-latitude polar areas where you are supposed to lose more heat than you get in. That's why the effect, the global warming effect, is so much more pronounced in the polar area. In fact, there's a term called polar amplification. And that's where the effect is being felt the most. So, I know you've got some questions, and I know you wanted to hit me with them, but before we started on those, I just kind of wanted to give a Earth Heat Balance 101 as to how the whole thing works to begin with.
One thing, I don't know if I saw this somewhere, but I've always thought of it as the your car sitting in a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
It is always hotter than the outside.
During the day.
Yeah.
The
your seats, your everything inside soaks up the heat, and then it can't get out
right
as good as it came in. So
right.
think of it as that's why our car is so hot, because it can't. Your seats all soak it up, and then it comes out at a lower frequency,
right?
And it can't get out, so it just builds up.
Builds up. Yeah.
That is the greenhouse effect.
And the greenhouse, and that's how greenhouses work. That's why it's called the greenhouse effect.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. That's how a greenhouse works.
For instance, just real quick before you kind of hit your questions, going back roughly 400,000 years, say ice core samples, scientists can determine how much CO2 is in the atmosphere from the ice. And levels ran anywhere from about 190 parts per million to right around a massive peak at around 300, and that was over 300,000 years ago. The other peaks are right around the 270, 280 range parts per million. We have again now gone over 400 parts per million. So we have greatly altered that with the burning of fossil fuels and the byproduct of CO2 that we've put into the atmosphere, millions of tons a year.
Can they, going back with the ice, the CO2 in the ice, can they see how hot it was then?
There are temperature graphs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how extensive they are. I don't know. I do know that since we've been keeping, what I've studied most and what I've looked at most is since we started keeping records, directly measuring temperature and then also measuring via satellite.
What's the main ways? Weather balloons and satellites? Is that?
Well, certainly thermometers for surface based.
Yeah.
But weather balloons do take weather data as they go up, but that's very, very spotty. There are 100 sites across the entire United States that release weather balloons twice a day. We're talking about 100 spots across the entire United States. So that's spotty data. Satellite data has been used extensively for the past few decades to plot temperatures, take temperature observations not only at surface but in the lower troposphere.
Okay. I guess I didn't really ask you, but the first question, it's not even a question. Global warming wasn't happening, so they changed it to climate change. And you already kind of gave your answer on that.
Yeah, again, I use them interchangeably. I don't really get hung up on one versus the other.
And talking about the wording of things, we have, and when I looked it up, it just got childish.
Yeah.
What do you call climate deniers or climate skeptics or climate believers? And it just, from there, it just got worse.
Well, and when we were talking about doing this episode, and you came to me with the term alarmist, and I said, come up with something better.
Well, that's just the one I saw the most.
I know, but to me, that's a loaded term. An alarmist is that's the boy who cried wolf. That's someone who is seeing alarm without a reason to see alarm, and that's why.
Well, denier would be the same thing. That's like saying denying something.
Then say skeptic. Say skeptic.
Yeah.
Denier is a loaded term.
Yeah,
now, I personally think it's warranted, but we'll stay away from it. We'll stay away from.
I could care less.
I really don't care.
Heretic. We could call it that.
I really don't care.
That's but those were all in there. But the wording, like you said, the wording is important, and that's why global warming or climate change.
It's important. It's important if you're making a political argument to elicit an emotional response. It's important for that, and I want to stay away from that.
Definitely,
it's not why I'm here.
In the past 18 years, the globe has not warmed.
13 of the last 16 years, according to accepted data, have been the
credible
accepted temperature measurements data by United States, by NOAA, NASA, the UK, Japan, all go along with 13 of the past 16 years have been the warmest years on record. And what we have seen...
Is that land and ocean?
Yeah, that's it. That's globally. That's everything. And 2014 was the hottest year on record, beaten by 2015 by the biggest margin ever for 1 year.
But that was El Nino, though, right? Do they...
15 was an El Nino year.
How do they factor El Nino in?
Well, it's all part of it. I mean, it's just it's not like a fudge factor or anything. It's all part.
I figured they
it's
would
all
since
part.
it just
it's part of it because as it declines, then it will work its way out of the equation, or minimize its contribution to the equation as it declines. And you can certainly see El Nino peaks. 1998 was a very, very strong El Nino.
There was. Is it like every 4 years?
No, it's not that regular.
Okay.
And they have different strengths about them.
Okay.
It
but means the Christ child. Did you know that?
Yes.
Or the child.
The child.
Well, it comes around Christmas.
Yeah. All that's pretty loose. It's pretty loose. But 1998 was a very strong El Nino, and at that point, it was the warmest year on record. And then you see the peak when you look at a graph. You see the peak, and you see things come down a little bit
from what 90
from 98. But then you see them working their way back up, and again now 15 has superseded 14 as the warmest year ever, and the first 2 months of 16 are in fact I believe we go back to October, maybe September
of 15,
where September was the hottest September ever globally. October hottest, November hottest, December hottest, January hottest, February hottest.
But that's weather in that aspect, right?
Hottest ever. We're talking about a whole month over the whole globe. We're not talking about one city.
But that's not the climate, though, right? That's just the weather.
Weather over a while becomes climate.
So that hottest ever is the climate average? Not just...
Well, it's not the average. It's the hottest ever. I mean, if you have 150 years worth of Septembers and one number is bigger than all the others, it's the hottest September ever. The same thing with October, November, December, January, and February.
Okay, when we look at a climate data set, what are we looking at? 100 years, 50 years? How many numbers do we need to say, all right, this place is this type of
Well,
climate?
not all places started keeping records at the same time.
Okay, so America then.
Well, not all places in America started taking... I mean, you had Boston, Philadelphia, and New York keeping records before Kansas and Missouri did, and before Colorado and Utah and Oregon. So, record keeping expanded with people in terms of taking temperature observations. But when they talk about normals, and just in your daily, if you're watching a weather broadcast on your local news and it says that, the high today was 80, which was 4 degrees above normal, then the normal is a 30-year normal for that one point, and it's recalculated every 10 years.
And that's something you used to actually work on.
I actually worked on that when I was working at the National Climatic Data Center in Asheville, North Carolina, while I was finishing, and just after I finished my degree in atmospheric sciences. Yes. I worked on calculating. We were dropping at the time, let's see, that was 1991. We were going with the 60s, 70s, and 80s and dropping the 50s off of that database
gotcha.
and adding the 80s to that database.
I got you.
Again, it's a 30-year average, which is not to be confused with the lifetime record keeping.
Okay, so that gave you your climate for that area, those numbers? Or your...
It gave you a 30-year norm.
Okay.
It gave you a 30-year norm.
Okay.
Which, by the way, the 30-year norm that we're using now is warmer than the 30-year norm we used then, because we dropped cooler years off and added warmer years.
Okay. Sea ice is a big issue because why? Why is sea ice?
Well, sea ice is a great indicator that can't be affected by any kind of instrumental bias, and then a lot of pain is going to take instrumental and locational bias out.
Well, like you said, the drilling in the ice, that's something even the satellite can't help us with because it tells us way in the past what's happening. And is that why sea ice is so important with what's going on?
Well, first, sea ice it's an indicator of what's going on. If it's shrinking, it's because the areas where sea ice exists are warming. I mean, there's no other way around that. There's no there's no counter argument to, well, the Arctic region is warming.
Well, sure there is. I mean, it always does that. I mean, it shrinks and grows all
no, but
over
the
time.
term, the trend, not the term, the trend from when they first started taking satellite data in 1979 to now has been a decrease. Now, not every year is lower than the year before, but the trend is lower. And again, this is something I look at on a regular basis. The trend since the summer of 2007. That summer of 2007 dropped to levels that were well below anything before
projected.
It.
Yeah.
Well, they were well below anything before it, and then there was some recovery, and then the summer of 2012 comes along, and drops well below what the summer of 2007 was. Now, 13, 14, and 15 recovered some from the 2012.
We're talking about Arctic, right?
Arctic summer minimum ice coverage. But the 2013, 14, and 15 recovery from the 12 low are still below anything that happened pre-07. And I think in the summer of 07 was where I went from about 70% convinced, 30% skeptical, to about 95% convinced, 5% skeptical.
Now the only thing I found in my research that wasn't just complete bogus is there is an active volcano in that west area that apparently is losing a lot of ice. What's
west? What? Well, I don't.
That Arctic, I don't know. The Arctic West is what they called it. There's an active volcano in that area. And so of course it's going to be hotter, right?
I know not of what you. I don't know of any any volcanoes in the Arctic, because the Arctic is an ocean. There's no land.
Yeah.
Now, are you saying underneath?
Yeah, underneath, under the ocean. There's a volcano, active volcano.
You'll have to tell me where.
Yeah,
and
I'll
give
have
me
to,
a name.
I don't have that.
Okay.
But that's out of all there were numbers all over the place where you get one set of dates and two totally different temperature readings. So I ignored all of that. And the only thing that was not, I mean, you can't dispute a volcano being there, unless that was made up also. If there is one there, how bad would that throw things off?
Minimal and local would be my answer. Without looking into it more thoroughly, I'm going to say minimal and local.
Okay, what about the Antarctic? It's you hear it's growing.
There has been some. Now, the Antarctic is a little more complex because you actually have a landmass there with glaciers that are a couple of miles deep. Whereas at the Arctic, all you have is frozen seawater. That's it.
Glaciers.
So
no permafrost. No.
Well, I'm talking about the Arctic Ocean. I'm talking about sea ice.
Yeah.
Sea ice. You can't. permafrost is a land phenomenon.
Exactly. So that's Antarctica, right? Or that would be kind of like the Russian area.
We're talking. Permafrost is things for Siberia and Alaska and northern Canada.
Okay, so
there is a continent of Antarctica. There is a landmass there that has snowed on for millions of years, and that snow has piled up. And there is whether that ice is growing or shrinking, and then there is the sea ice around the Antarctic continent, and it has shown growth over the past. The jury's out on exactly what's going on there. Some of the studies talk about circulation patterns and
anomalies, maybe.
Well, circulation patterns that may be tightening up and keeping that ice in its confined area a little more, and therefore allowing it to grow. But I'll throw this out as just a personal hypothesis. When you look at a loop of CO2 that's been added to the atmosphere and you see it put in motion and you see where it moves and where it goes, there's just a lot less
down there
in the southern hemisphere. There's a lot fewer people using a lot less industrial equipment running on fossil fuels, and you don't get a whole lot of interchange between northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere air. You get some, but not a lot. So I put forth the notion that northern hemisphere may very well be affected far more by global warming than Southern Hemisphere. But again, that's just me, and that's just knowing how the CO2 is distributed unevenly between the two.
I know we didn't, we said we're going to try and keep politics out of it, but the consensus, I've seen 97% scientists agree, on global warming.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen there's whole websites devoted to proving just that wrong.
Okay.
And, do you have any thoughts on that?
Without looking at the survey, and I know that's a number that's been thrown around for several years, and
jokingly most times too.
Well, and I don't know what that survey cites, so I don't really get caught up in that survey or that number. But I do believe that there is a very significant consensus among scientists, and that we do have global warming. We have more and more. Even the Department of Defense now talks about global warming, and I've read stories where the Pentagon is doing things, to address global warming in
America, right? Because they can't do anything.
Well, America has interest all over the world.
They can do. The Pentagon can do.
Well, first of all, they're not doing anything to change it. They're just preparing for its effects.
The consensus questions, I actually Googled them, and the questions were: when compared with pre-1800 levels, do you think that mean global temperatures have generally risen, fallen, or remained relatively constant? That's question number one. What do you say?
I believe they've risen.
Okay.
And I believe they have risen more in the past several years. Like,
I think this consensus came out around when
I've heard that 97% figure a long time, and again, I don't really focus on it.
And the second question: do you think human activity is a significant contributing factor to the changing mean global temperatures?
Given the fact that human activity has brought CO2 levels to never before measured levels, and we are warming at a rate never before measured, then yes.
So you would be in that 97%, guys.
Okay.
And the only thing I've seen against that was discrediting the people who are agreeing.
Again, it's not something I focus my reading on.
I've seen this question: what is the optimal temperature? And that's kind of a stupid question because we're talking about the globe here.
It is a stupid question.
But there is a degree range that we can't go past, apparently.
Well, the scientists say that once we reach 2 degrees Celsius of warming on a global basis, that we will have reached a dangerous level in terms of
no return.
Well, I don't know about no return, but in terms of changing of melting enough ice, Greenland and possibly Antarctica, to raise sea levels enough to start being a significant problem. And remember, I told you, and I can't relate what I saw a few weeks ago directly to, because I haven't done the study myself, but I told you about going down in farther southeast Louisiana a few weeks ago and seeing a current battle where they are pulling dirt out of one place and putting it in another to keep a land area and a highway from going underwater. I saw it, and there's actually a village down there that the federal dollars are now going to relocate. It's a Native American village to relocate out of the area because their home is ceasing to exist because it is going underwater. I forget the name of it, but I just...
The village?
Yeah, I forget the name of it.
One thing before we go on a break, aerosols. Okay. Aerosols back in, the 70s? There's a hole in the atmosphere. They found out. When did all this go down?
Okay, well, you're talking about artificial aerosols put in by CFCs.
Yes.
And there was actually, I believe it was the Montreal Accord that said we were going to find another way to spray on our underarm deodorant and our hairspray. And the world came to a consensus that we weren't going to use those anymore.
So it made
a hole in the ozone is a different
hadn't done nothing to do with.
Well, it I don't know, it has nothing to do with it, but they're two different things.
So when we're talking about aerosols
aerosols can be anything,
water vapor,
anything that's in the air. Anything.
CO2?
A volcanic explosion putting volcanic ash in the air. And in fact, in the early around 1990, I remember I was finishing up my college. Mount Pinatubo had a major explosion. I mean, it made Mount St. Helens look like a firecracker going off.
Dang.
And it put enough aerosol matter high into the atmosphere that went all the way around the globe that actually blocked out enough of the sun rays to show cooling, and it does show up on a graph of global temperatures.
Well, I mean, yeah, if the world was covered in clouds, we'd be freezing all the time, right?
No,
It wouldn't.
No.
If the whole globe was covered in clouds, we wouldn't be cold.
No,
all the time?
but no, because there are hot planets that are Venus. Venus is covered with certain kinds of clouds,
and it's real hot.
Because the light penetrates. Again, the light penetrates. Venus actually is suffering from a runaway greenhouse effect. The sunlight comes in, but it does not get out. That's why it's hundreds upon hundreds of degrees on the surface of Venus. So there are a lot of things that in the air. Some of these things let light through, but let energy through, but then don't let it back out. And some of them actually deflect part of it and don't let it in. They act differently. Water vapor is a greenhouse gas.
It's the biggest.
CO2 is a greenhouse gas. And if you want to talk about one and the other, as oceans warm, and they are warming, they evaporate more water vapor into the atmosphere. As the atmosphere gets warmer, it can hold more water vapor. So this is one of the things that we get into a positive feedback loop where warming begets water vapor, begets more warming, begets more water vapor, so on and so forth. It's kind of like with ice coverage in the Arctic Ocean. When sunlight hits ice or snow, most of that is reflected right back out to space. But if you are taking away ice coverage and adding dark water to the surface, then that sunlight is absorbed in the form of heat energy as opposed to sent back out from hitting an ice surface, and which is one reason why, and I think you asked me this a while ago, which is one reason why Arctic ice coverage is so important, because as you lose it, not only do you lose the northern hemisphere's air conditioner, but you also lose part of the Earth's ability to send energy back out of the atmosphere. It becomes stored again.
And then put up as water vapor.
Heat in the oceans.
But then water vapor, right?
Well, some of it, but not all of it.
I just remember seeing water vapor as our biggest greenhouse gas.
But I'm talking about something else now. I'm talking about a shrinking ice sheet. And if you shrink the ice sheet, then you shrink the albedo of that part of the Earth. And the albedo is how much reflectivity you send back.
But wouldn't it all be balanced out if it would turn into water vapor, which is already a natural occurring thing? It's our biggest greenhouse gas.
But you're adding more to it.
Adding more
water vapor. So they just said a hotter ocean.
So we get more clouds.
Yes.
Making it colder.
No. That was your thing a while ago. More clouds do not make it colder.
How not? They bounce off, right?
No.
So if the world were covered in clouds, it would be warmer.
That's overly simplistic. Some places would be cooler because they're sun-baked deserts right now.
With no clouds.
Yes.
But if there were clouds covering it, it would be cooler, right?
There are locations that are sunny almost all the time, and if you were just to magically put a cloud deck over them, then that location would probably be cooler, although it would also be warmer at night because you would radiate less of that heat away from the Earth.
All right. Well, I'm getting into hypotheticals, and that's the worst thing we want to do.
Okay.
So, let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about some more stuff.
Outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stopping, And I've brought some corn for popping. The lights are turned way down low. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. When we finally kiss goodnight, how I hate going out in the storm. But if you really hold me...
Okie doke, we are back. Just to kind of give y'all a general how I, being as normal Joe Schmo on this topic as it gets, just hit the internet, came up with since John is a climate change believer. Is that what we're going
Well,
with?
I'm also a meteorologist.
And a meteorologist, of course. But there are meteorologists that disagree, so I can't just say you're a meteorologist.
No, right. I just wanted to make the point that I didn't wake up one morning and because
definitely.
a Democrat said the Earth is
gotcha,
warming up,
gotcha. Got you. Yeah, that's a good point to make.
Yeah.
So I'm a non-meteorologist asking John debatable topics.
Well, I believe you found some points of skeptics, and you are gonna.
And that's what I've been doing.
You're going to throw
the whole
some
time.
at me.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing the whole time. I just
Okay.
kind of wanted to say,
Right.
this isn't everything I've even said is Google knowledge. So that I, scrutinize the sources and who's funding this person in it. That's the main thing I did. So the next one is can't predict the weather. Oh yeah, can't predict the weather next week. How can we say what's going to happen? 10 years from now.
Yeah, but we can.
But
we can.
They're almost all wrong.
No, they're not. No, they're not. For instance, I know I told you last week that we were going to have a major precipitation event, more than one day long, where the south central part of the United States was going to get heavy flooding rain.
But
And it's just starting. And is weather forecasting a week in advance perfect? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But to say that we don't have any idea what the weather's going to be like a week from now in any given place is usually wrong. We usually have some idea. But here's something else. Predictability is also partly a function of time and scale. And by that I mean it is easier for me to tell you that a large-scale event is going to happen than a small-scale event is going to happen. And certainly if we are talking about weather and climate on a global basis and something warming or cooling on a global basis, the global temperature increasing or decreasing 10, 20, 30 years from now, based on the fact that more and more CO2 is being put into the atmosphere, I believe that it is quite scientifically based to say that is more predictable than whether a tornado will hit in a certain parish or county 5 days from now or 10 days from now. So in that sense, I'm saying yes, something 10, 20, 30 years from now is more predictable than something 10 days from now. But again, we're talking about scale.
I agree that we can and are pretty good at the weekly basis, but I've seen 42 of the last 44 climate models were wrong.
Well, I can't address that because I don't know where that's coming from. I mean, wrong in what way? Maybe they were conservative.
Just extremely high. Extremely high. There was the only ones that were conservative were the two close ones, and they're definitely going up, but not as extreme. And I think that's because of I saw that is because we have a point. How many megatons? What did you call the CO2? How do we measure it? Parts per million. The parts per million. It was just going with that on a straight linear, straight up, and showing what our climate would become, and it just hasn't followed that. So
I've not seen these, so I can't comment on them.
Yeah, and I'm doing a terrible job telling you about them. But they're coming out lower, and that's why this came out. If we can't predict the weather, which we can, why can't we predict? Can we predict the future, which you say is actually easier?
I'm saying that on scale, on planetary scale, if you were taking a phenomenon like adding CO2 to the atmosphere, which is a greenhouse gas, which therefore will warm things, which therefore will add more water vapor to the atmosphere, which will therefore warm things more. And I'm not talking about at a point. I'm talking about on a planetary scale. If you're doing, let's say, for instance, if you're doing a winter out, people love seasonal outlooks, especially going into winter, right? People love to pick up the Old Farmer's Almanac to see what the winter's going to be like. People love to say the National Weather Service came out and said the winter months of December, January, February were going to be X warmer or Y cooler or wetter or whatever. You've seen those. You've heard them referred to. People love them, don't they?
Yep.
They're most often wrong.
Yep.
Because they're trying to pinpoint a region and say the weather for this 3-month period is going to be warmer or colder in this specific region that may cover a few states.
Mm-hmm.
That's very different than predicting the overall global temperature rising 0.5 degree Celsius over a 10 or 20 year time span. Again, I can't tell you with the same certainty that I can tell you my name that the climate model is right, but I believe that it is based on sound science. And because we're talking about a difference of scale, of time and size, I believe it can hold credence, whereas maybe a winter outlook for, say, the southern United States, because I'll tell you right now, the National Weather Service said we were going to have a cooler than normal winter. The winter that we just ended. Here we are on the 9th of March, and the December, January, February that just ended said we were going to be cooler. Now, I told you I felt otherwise, and it wasn't cooler. It was much, much milder than normal here. But again, I'm talking about a specific time period in a specific region, and that's harder to do than just saying the whole globe is going to warm 0.5 degree, with Arctic regions more notably feeling the warmth than tropical regions.
So you'd stand by firmly the satellite readings and everything then?
Yes.
Okay. I've seen differences in what the land and air is temperature readings and what balloons are showing, because of the CO2 makes it hotter in the area. The land is saying 70, but what's the CO2 gets trapped in the troposphere?
Well, a lot of it's in the troposphere. That's the
so that's
lowest.
Where the weather balloons go and read, and it's it doesn't match up. What would be the reason for that?
I'm not buying the whole weather balloon thing, because we're talking about spots. We're talking about very, very, very sparse data.
But but if you're concentrating on an area and you're doing an experiment in this area, you're looking at
what kind of experiment?
The CO2 and temperature differences.
Well, I believe those are measured more by satellites than
weather
weather
balloons.
Doing
both. You're doing satellite and weather balloons, because if the CO2 is the problem, then it would show in the troposphere, right?
To my knowledge, weather balloons don't measure CO2.
They would measure the temperature, though.
They do measure temperature.
If the CO2 was a problem in the troposphere, wouldn't it be warmer than projected? I'm seeing reports where it's not, is why I bring it up.
Weather balloons don't make projections.
No, but you're getting the data from the troposphere.
You get much more complete data from satellites.
They're being proved wrong a lot.
Satellites?
Yeah.
I don't believe that to be the case.
I'm not saying they're inaccurate.
How do you prove it wrong?
I'm not saying they're inaccurate. I'm just saying with that situation where you're saying the CO2, which is in the troposphere, where the weather balloon is recording, should be higher if CO2 were the problem, but it's not. It's actually cooler, where the satellite is saying it's warmer.
Are you saying that someone's taken satellite data that has been taken from the exact spot a weather balloon was put up, and the two are showing different readings, and the weather balloon reading is lower? Is that what? Because other than a direct comparison, I'm not real sure what you're saying.
They're getting they're charting it. They're charting
who's charting what?
Scientists.
Let me tell you the function. I'll just tell you the function of weather balloons. Again, there are 100 sites around the U.S. that release weather balloons twice a day. Once at 0Z and once at 12Z. And they release those up and they take readings of temperature, pressure, humidity. And as it rises and the wind carries it downstream and it rises, then that data goes back to the office that released it. And then that's all fed into the next model run to predict the next 24 hours to 2 weeks worth of weather in models. Now, where this comes in with long-term climate analysis, I don't know.
They're making some kind of graph out of the data they get.
Well, I've not seen it, and I can't address it.
So could a weather balloon, could it dispute satellite imagery?
Not to my knowledge, but again, I've not seen use of weather balloons in this way. I've not read articles about the use of weather balloons used to dispute satellite data.
One of the areas they do it in was Greenland, and it was, they're getting different readings. And the reason I bring that up is they say Greenland used to be green. It's another one of those, that you hear all the time. So how is that significant in climate change or global warming?
It turns out that scientific study shows that Greenland was green at one time. 2.5 million years ago.
What does that mean?
It means it wasn't a concern to mankind. Sure
it is.
No, it was not 2.5 million years ago.
It was still the Earth. It's still.
Well, but if there was some sort of circulation pattern that brought warm air to parts of Greenland to where parts of Greenland were actually warm and green 2.5 million years ago before people inhabited this planet, and if sea levels rose 10 or 20 feet because Greenland ice melted, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter to mankind. We didn't have to survive it because we weren't here. So to say that now there is this thing. Somebody was sent to Greenland and they called it Greenland. It was some criminal or something was sent there, and he wanted to trick people into settling Greenland. So he called it Greenland, and that's actually in human history.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And so that was just a complete farce, as someone was trying to trick people into coming to Greenland, even though it was covered with ice. But it does turn out that the scientific data do show that Greenland was roughly 2.5 million years ago. Part of it was actually ice-free and green.
So it melting, it freezing has, what does that prove? Because if it used to be green and now it's frozen.
Well, there's certainly a lot colder period in somewhere between 2.5 million years ago.
Little ice age.
First of all, there have been numerous ice ages.
Yeah,
there have been numerous ice ages, and there have been numerous interglacial periods. Between
warm. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, warm periods.
Yeah, okay.
And here's something else: is they happen over a span of centuries and millennia.
Could we be coming into
not
one of
over a span of years and decades.
Well, could we be coming into one of those?
A little ice age?
No, a
warming period.
A warming?
Oh, we're in one. We're definitely in one.
Because I've seen that, they name them, and the one I remember is a medieval warming period.
Yeah, and
then a little ice age.
They take a while. They take a while.
Well, we've been rising since the Little Ice Age. We've been getting warmer since the Little Ice Age.
We've been getting warm fast in the past couple of decades.
Okay.
Warm fast.
Okay.
I don't.
So I don't
think you're understanding something taking place over several centuries or millennia versus something taking place over years or decades is very, very different.
Okay. It's just going to get hotter than the medieval hot period. But are you saying it's not going to come down?
I'm saying that all the evidence I see points that CO2 has increased to the point where we have altered the Earth's ability to shed heat the way it had been shedding heat.
Okay, CO2.
And natural variability notwithstanding, you still see that in the data right now. There are peaks and valleys, but the trend is in one direction.
It's up, yeah. I agree. It's definitely getting warmer, but I'm also saying that's part of Earth's climate. It's gonna it's going
Well,
to
one
do
thing
that.
one thing that people talk about in natural variability is the irradiance coming from the sun, and that's
Sunspots?
Well, sunspots they run on an 11-year cycle, and your amount of sunlight energy actually reaching the top of the Earth's atmosphere does vary on this 11-year cycle. And I've seen charts where it actually up and down on the 11-year cycle, but then the ups get higher and the downs get higher, and then they start heading down again. The data I've seen shows that since around 1960, the general trend in that has been slightly downward, whereas the temperature trend has been upward.
So the sun radiance, even though it's getting stronger, even though it's getting weaker, the temperature is going higher.
Yes.
Okay, so does that totally disprove that theory?
To me, it does. If you're going to say it's because of the sun, and if the sun has gotten incrementally, and I'm talking about incrementally weaker, and it's not that the sun's gotten weaker, it's just the amount of energy we're receiving from it has just gone down a little bit. It's not to say that the sun has gotten weaker.
Okay, here's something I saw. It is getting weaker, and this is just a peak before the valley. It's going to start cooling. Like, we should be getting ready for a global cooling more than warming.
It has been this irradiance has been going down again with ups and downs, but has been trending downward since about 1960.
And it's still getting hotter.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, people are saying it's going to go. The temperature is going to start dropping.
I guess people can say anything, but there's nothing that supports that because
there is, but I can't quote it right now.
It has been going. The irradiance has been going down, but the temperature has still been going up.
It's happening in the solar system, the whole solar system. So that's why you can use these. No, you can't do that.
Well, to me, that's just pointless now. I mean,
if it's
we're talking about the sun hitting the Earth, and we have data for that, and it's something on the order of 1,365 watts per meter squared, and it varies around that number, give or take a watt. Give or take 1 watt per meter squared. It varies on an 11-year cycle. That's accounted for, that's observed, that's documented, and that has been dropping for about the past 50 or 55 years. And in the face of that dropping, temperatures have been going up. So if they were correlated, and if one was leading to the other, then they would be doing the same thing.
CO2, I see it does not lead, it actually lags. What do you say to that? Where they show readings from however far ago they go, where the temperature changes first, then the CO2 follows, instead of the other way around, which they say disproves that CO2 is the reason for warmer temperatures. Do you think that's a chart that is doctored by people who wanted to say something?
Well, I'd want to see it. I mean, I'd want to see it, and I'd want to see the source, and I'd want to see the reasoning. I mean, I'd want to see.
It was on the Inconvenient Truth.
I would want to see why a warming Earth would just create more CO2. I would just want to see.
They're to make more vegetation, because CO2 it helps vegetation. Okay. The Earth is trying to produce more trees. So what would you say to that?
I would say that since the Industrial Revolution, we have run millions of vehicles and machines on fuels that have CO2 as a byproduct. And every year we do more and more of that. I'd say that's an easy, straightforward answer. And once you see that answer, all other answers pale in comparison.
Well, what if I were to tell you that the same amount of trees were greener and more lush because of the more CO2 in the atmosphere, counterbalancing all these vehicles, absorbing all of the CO2 they're putting in the atmosphere? Again,
satellite data does not confirm that, because we can measure CO2 in the atmosphere, and we also have measuring places around the Earth which now have us at over 400 parts per million. I mean, these aren't speculative. These are actual measurements that we're taking on Earth-based measurements that show that the concentrations of CO2 are going up and up and up and up and up. and we are running millions of CO2 producing machines in this world. I believe the core to come up with another reason is because you just don't want to accept the obvious reason. That's my answer to that.
The urban heat island effect. What is that?
Urban heat island effect is certainly an effect, and it is a real thing. And here's what happens. It's more pronounced at night during the daytime. But urban areas with concrete and asphalt and steel during the day will absorb more energy than a forested area or just dirt, just a land, just a flat land area. And as the sun sets, a forested area or a flat area somewhere would release that heat readily into the atmosphere. But the concrete, asphalt, and steel of streets, roads, buildings, parking lots
would reflect it?
would hold it.
Okay.
Would hold it, and so you would have, and again, it's more pronounced at night, would hold that heat. So there are obviously, urban heat islands are a real thing. But as we've collected data over the years, we've taken great pains to account for urban heat areas.
Okay, I was about to ask, how could someone trying to discredit climate warming or global warming use that?
Well, and let me say this about that. There aren't any urban heat islands in the Arctic.
Okay.
Where the ice is disappearing.
But there's a volcano down there.
First I've heard of it. I'm going to say point specific and minimal in terms of any kind of heat production.
I remember it was something about the west side, west crest, west something. So that's as scientific and accurate as I get on that one.
Okay. I don't know.
So I didn't really see much about
Let me say something about urban heat islands that I found very fascinating, because I lived outside of Atlanta, Georgia for about 8 years. And there were times where I might be driving, I might have taken a trip and I was coming back in, and I might hit Atlanta, usually coming in from the west, and go through Atlanta and then go to my home, which was about 35 or 40 miles out of Atlanta to the northeast.
Big temperature difference?
Big temperature difference. On the order of 15 or 20 degrees. If I was coming in from the west and I had just driven through some of the rural areas of northern Alabama and western Georgia and coming in, and as I would top a crest, and it was right there, right around Six Flags Over Georgia on the west side of Atlanta, and the temperature would go up and up and up and up. And like I said, on a clear night, it might be 15 degrees warmer there. And then as I head out to where I was living, it would start going down again. And when I would leave, I was Interstate 85, and it was always fascinating. I would go from 6 lanes of highway, and then I would branch off, and I would get off onto a little local road. And when I would go from, even though I was well out of town, when I would go from 6 lanes of highway to a little local road, I would lose another 4 or 5 degrees, just like that. So the urban heat island is something that's very, very real.
So it's used to say that the models are wrong because you're not accounting for this? Is that what I'm getting?
I believe we have taken great pains to account, and I can't tell you what they all are, but I believe we've taken great pains for it. And again, there aren't any urban heat islands in the Arctic areas where we continue to lose ice coverage.
All right, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with... We're actually going to get into politics in this next segment.
Okay.
And see where that goes.
All right.
We're having a heat wave. A tropical heat wave. The temperature's rising, it isn't surprising. She certainly can. She started the heat wave by letting her seat wave, and in such a way that the customers say that she certainly can.
So that song you just picked out.
Totally randomly, by the way.
Yeah, you had right. But what happens at the beginning of Grumpy Old Man? The opening,
the first one.
Yeah, Grumpy Old Man.
Is that song play?
Yes, it does. And Walter Matthau's walking out to his mailbox, and
it's of course snowing,
and it snows all over the place, and it's cold, and he's singing that song, and then that version of that song comes on. So while I'm up in Michigan on that 18-degree day, hiking around with my friend who said she absolutely hates cold weather, I started singing that song just to get on her nerves. But anyway. When you started playing that, I just had to chuckle because I was just singing that song in that context.
That's pretty funny. And then I totally randomly, I just Google searched songs with heat, songs with cold.
Right.
That's why I found that Michael Buble, It's Cold Outside, and then Heatwave. Fitzgerald?
No, that wasn't Heatwave. That's tropical. That was Tropical Heatwave.
What was on YouTube was Heatwave.
Heatwave, okay,
yeah.
All right.
Ella Fitzgerald.
Because I'm thinking of a disco song, or maybe the group was Heatwave. Anyway, okay. I don't want to get off into song. I don't want to get off into music trivia.
Okay, I kind of touched on this earlier. The sun is doing things on other planets that they are saying that the sun is the main source of global warming. No, not global warming, climate change. Which they are agreeing on. They're essentially saying it's the sun, saying it's not humans.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about other planets because that's a ridiculous part of the conversation to have. But we can talk about about the sun and Earth. And let me just say this, above and beyond what I've already said about the role that the sun plays and the very slight variations in the sun's irradiance. And again, they're very, very, very slight. They're less than 1/10 of 1% from peak to trough. They're very slight. But if the sun were causing global warming, it would be more pronounced where the sun is hitting more directly in the tropics, and it would be more pronounced during the day than during the night. And both of those are complete opposite wrongs. If it were the sun, it would be where the sun is having the biggest effect and during the time of day, and it is not. So it's not the sun.
The thing you tossed to the side originally was the thing this one hit on the most. Somehow, and I can't say how, other planets doing what they're doing proves that the sun is the reason we're having our warming.
We don't know enough how other planets have changed over the past few hundred years. We just started looking at other planets.
There was another thing about how they even found water on the sun. And let's see, Pluto.
Water on the sun.
Pluto is ice core. And somehow all of these things prove we aren't human.
I have no idea what water on the sun means. I can't even. No, I'm not. I'm not going there. The surface of the sun is tens of thousands of degrees. No.
Okay, so
no.
I'll make sure to put that link in there. So
okay,
you can,
please do.
Please do. Look at it. And the main thing I saw was when I'm just I'm looking for what can John come back with, and that seemed like something I thought you would have for. But okay, CO2 comes mostly from volcanoes. That's another point you hear.
If that is so, then we have more volcanoes active on Earth now than we have ever had before.
I say that's worded wrong because CO2 comes mostly from the ocean, right?
No, CO2 is coming mostly from...
It's not us.
Yes, it is.
No way. Us and then the ocean, we produce more CO2?
We have... CO2 is higher now than it's ever been. We know how it gets in the atmosphere.
We're producing CO2.
And it's higher than it's ever been. It's just higher than it's ever been.
Do we produce more?
We don't have more oceans than we've ever had.
Do we produce more CO2 than volcanoes?
Like I just said, if volcanoes do more than anything else, then that means we have twice as many volcanoes active on Earth than we've ever had before. And we don't.
Okay. No proof CO2 is causing global warming.
And I will tell you this. There is more proof of that than there is that a virgin gave birth to someone in a manger in Bethlehem.
Okay.
Okay, that's my answer. If you're looking for physical proof, there is more proof of that. I mean, since that is such a vague statement, then I'll just say there is more physical proof of that than a virgin gave birth.
Okay. So bringing in, the religious
Mhm.
part of it, that's something I believe is,
Okay.
this is more religion than anything. It is a environmental religion that people are being brought over to.
An environmental religion.
Yes.
Where might one of these environmental churches be?
The IPCC,
What is that?
International something for climate change.
Okay. And that makes it a religion?
Oh, definitely.
They take up offering, they pray?
Okay. But I mean, do Muslims do that? Take up offering?
I don't know. I've never been one.
Do Jews do that? I mean, I'm not saying Christianity. They're like Christians. I'm saying it's like a religion.
I don't see,
Like, 'cause
I don't,
when
I
I-
don't see
when
any
I-
evidence in that.
Well, I do when I look at the one side and the other, and the huge emotional reactions you get, the defense, the sometimes totally bogus, made up stuff just to prove you're right. It sounds very religious to me.
Okay.
It just feels like a religion to me. That's my
that's-
personal view. I
Okay.
mean,
I don't agree. I don't agree.
what would it be? I mean, because in sometimes it gets because politics get involved. When the politics get involved and emotions are
Which was why I wanted to keep this whole. I
Well,
wanted to cite data.
we
wanted
wanted
to
to get
cite
into
data.
politics of it though, and this is my little segue into it.
Okay.
So, politics get involved, and then they start stirring the emotional pot, and you get stuff like you were killing the polar bears. Who won't get on board to save the polar bears?
Well, a lot of people won't.
Because they weren't dying.
The vast majority of Americans don't care about this.
Well, they're not dying. The polar bears aren't dying. That's what I'm getting at.
I haven't taken a census, and again, I am really not looking at the biology of it. I mean, I've read stories about polar bears. I've read stories about warming oceans is doing things to coral reefs and marine life.
Yeah,
I've read that, but I won't address it because I don't feel like I know enough to talk intelligently about it.
The International Panel for Climate Change. That was it.
An International Panel for Climate Change doesn't sound real religious to me.
Well, if I had to give a church for climate change, that's the one.
Okay.
The reason I say that is because no matter what you ask them, climate change is, the doom. That's climate change is, no matter what you show in adverse to them, they'll.
Well, and again, I don't. As you and I have talked about this, I don't. And before, not just on the show here, but in other times, I don't believe there is verifiable data showing that climate change is not happening. I just don't think it's there. I've looked at this so much. I don't anything that is brought out is cherry picked and presented in a way.
Yep, both sides are doing it.
I don't. Okay. And again, I'm not going to defend what some person is going to say that's just taking a side. I believe the data is what I'm talking about.
So the reason, so we've got the politics get involved. You get money going into a very small climate industry from under 500 million, and that jumped almost overnight to 2 billion, creating all these jobs, getting world powers on one side or the other. Where money is involved, it seems like a lot of propaganda.
Okay,
on both sides.
if you want to say money is a driving force between taking a side on climate change, if that's what you're saying, and you threw out I don't know where it's from, but you throw out a $2 billion figure,
And that's probably old. It's probably more than that.
Okay, but $2 billion, that's a figure you just used. If money is corrupting this argument, how much money is coming from oil and coal,
A lot.
and natural gas to fund the counter argument?
A lot.
A lot more than $2 billion. So if you're saying that greed and money are the causes of this whole conversation even taking place, then I'm going to say, look to the no, it's not really happening side for the greed and the money.
So the climate change industry is demanding $45 trillion in new taxes, subsidies, and the like. Huge transference of political and economic control to politicians and lobbyists associated with the climate industry complex.
$45 trillion is a lot of money, and that just sounds like a figure that someone came up with to say, look what they're doing, they're being greedy, and they want to take power. Let's not let them have it. And again, I'm just going to have to repeat what I just said. If this is about money, greed, and power, that exists with the status quo / fossil fuels, and not with the scientific community that is trying to come up with solutions to this issue.
On that defense, I've seen stick with the side that is saying, let's save the world. And that's what a lot of people tend to do. Just in case, I'm going to be on the side that's saying, you know what, the world's probably ending and we can probably do something about it. You don't want to be on the other side of that, right?
I think to say it's ending is a bit of a stretch.
Point of no return. That's pretty much saying it's ending.
Becoming much less inhabitable, I believe, is very well within the realm of possibility, and I believe it's within the realm of possibility within your lifetime, or certainly within your daughter's lifetime, if not within my lifetime, becoming less inhabitable. Let me explain what I mean by less inhabitable.
Well, that's a part of human nature. That's always happened. Parts of our world have become to where we need to migrate to other places, right? It's natural. That's part of our.
It comes with upheaval and war, is what it comes with, and trust me. There's a lot of talk, and I didn't want to going down through this because I haven't looked at it closely enough. But there's a lot of talk, especially from the Democratic side of the spectrum, that a lot of the conflict in Syria was brought about by famine, brought about by drought, brought about by global warming. Now, the reason I don't really like going there is because I think it's hard to point at any one particular weather phenomenon and say that is being driven by global warming / climate change. So, therefore, I'm hesitant to go there about any one occurring situation or weather event. However, as weather patterns change, there will be areas that will be able to grow less food. There will be areas that will have less water. That creates hardship, that creates migration, that creates a lot of things, that creates stresses, that also creates hardship on those that already have less and are already on the edges of surviving. So, will global warming, if it continues down the path it is, I'm putting forth a question now.
Okay.
Will it lead to more hardship on the planet and therefore more conflict and therefore the possibility of more war and starvation? I believe that it will. I also believe that as climate zones move poleward, and by that I mean as things warm and temperature areas move poleward from the equator, I believe tropical-borne diseases, mosquito-borne diseases will spread more northward than they have before. I also think that's another possibility. I think we're seeing something here in the United States. I believe the California drought that has been going on for several years is probably has some correlation with climate change and global warming. And since we grow a vast majority of the vegetables that we eat in this country and a good portion of the fruit as well, I believe it will lead to hardships. I think one thing that we do that's dangerous here, and especially in America, is we just always think everything's going to be okay, and we rely on our technological ability to solve every problem, because let's face it, we haven't had a real threatening situation to our existence here in the United States in a very long time, if ever. And I'm talking about things like plague and famine and starvation. We haven't had that on a wide scale, and we consider ourselves immunized against it. And I don't mean in the form of taking shots. I mean immunized from the likelihood that we are at the mercy of nature on a large scale. And I think we are, but I don't think we believe we are. We know we are on a scale of several hundred or several thousand square miles where a hurricane can hit or where tornadoes can hit. We know we're vulnerable on that scale. I don't think we accept that we are vulnerable on a larger scale than that, but I believe that we are. And I believe we may find that out sooner rather than later.
What was the question?
I don't know. It all flowed, at least in my mind.
Okay. The political part of it. I've seen and I tried what I guess science. You take the scientific method and you come at it unbiased. No
I attempt
agenda.
to. I know I attempt to.
Yes, that's you.
Yes.
You try to. A scientist would do that, and then politics gets involved. With the swing of money and all the power and everything. Projections have been wrong, so skeptic pool is growing. The left is in denial about shortcomings, and the right is trying to use that to attack with deregulation. And those two things are an ugly combo. And that's why this topic will forever go on until something drastic, like you just mentioned, something not, you can't blame it on a hurricane. You can't blame it on a tornado out of its normal area. You can't do that. But something totally drastic until somebody is absolutely wrong. It's just going to keep going on.
We are not having an adult conversation about this in America, but Europe is leading the way on dealing with this. I've read any number of stories over the past year or so about different countries in Europe, setting new records with solar power and wind power.
We talked about that.
And we talked about it last year on our Earth Day segment. And so again, I think this is just another area where here in the United States we're failing to have an adult conversation. Fortunately, other places are.
So you're I guess saying that one day will come around before this travesty happens that I'm saying will?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think it'll be before.
So they're not going to talk us into it before something bad happens?
I think we've shown a great ability not to be talked into anything.
So, hoaxes and conspiracy theories? Want to hear some?
Sure.
Okay. The Illuminati is manufacturing disasters to control the world's population.
Okay.
Nothing on it?
No.
Kyoto Protocol. Something about keeping Africa, or not, well, Africa, but
developing
countries from developing, because if they develop, more CO2. So, and I know that's old news, the Kyoto Protocol, which you told me.
Well, I think that was something that was attempted years ago, and again, I'm not real well.
The conspiracy theory is that that's to keep them from becoming developed and to keep energy, coal and oil reliant economies weak. Therefore, us and the European Union they're trying to damage the U.S. economy by reducing the greenhouse emissions, which would shrink our economy.
Conspiracy theory.
You think? I mean, it doesn't hold any water.
No, I don't think it holds any water.
Okay. Eco-anxiety, a symptom or byproduct of our increasing disconnection from the planet. So as we get more technological, our eco-anxiety kicks in, and we want to give back to Mother Earth. Is kind of what this is getting at. Our disconnect from the Earth is making us anxious.
So is this a conspiracy theory?
That was under hoaxes and conspiracy theories.
I don't know if this answers your theory or your question or not, but I know when I go outdoors to a scenic area and enjoy it, I feel better.
Okay, I agree. I think
especially a mountainous area.
We do, and it probably differs because some people get it from the beach. Maybe. Sure. I agree. You get something from it.
I do. So, I know I do.
So, okay, Oklahoma Senator James M. Inhofe said Greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people.
I got 2 words for you.
Political. Politician.
Oklahoma senator. I mean, look. Okay. Oklahoma it depends significantly on oil and gas drilling and fracking and everything else, right? Oklahoma is ass deep in the oil industry, right? You tell me which is more logical. He's in their pockets and vice versa, or he's actually looking at data and coming up with an independent answer. You tell me which is more likely.
I don't believe I have to.
Okay.
The plant, and this could be a movie. The plants are causing the warming and excess CO2 to be produced, so we will all die off and they can take over.
You know what? That sounds very much like a horrible movie that I actually paid money in the theater to see. M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening was the worst damn movie I've ever seen in my life.
I wouldn't say worst.
Yeah, it was. It was.
That's your worst?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was supposed to be serious.
Huh. I wonder if it had a climate change.
I think it definitely had an environmental.
No,
it was supposed to have an environmental message, but oh my God, it was terrible. It was every bit as bad as San Andreas, if not worse.
So you don't like the eco movies then?
That movie sucked. That movie was terrible. That movie was dreadful.
Okay. I mean, I watched it with you.
Well, and so as you brought that up just now,
what you would say? What the acting? What is it?
Everything.
The plot,
the plot, the acting, the directing. It just made no sense whatsoever. For one thing, it was supposed to be caused by the plants, right? Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be caused by the plant. The very first people you see committing suicide are jumping off of a high-rise building in New York City.
Yeah. There's plants in New York City.
It's supposed to be caused by the plant, so it's not going to start there. It's not going to start on the top of some roof up here. It's going to start.
That's your rub. It started in New York.
It was the whole thing was my rub. I didn't say that was a horrible scene in a great movie. I said that was the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. It was terrible.
So if it started in the jungle, you'd be believing it?
It would be a little more feasible.
Only reason I watched that movie is because the old boy cranked up the lawnmower and laid down in front of it.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you watch that movie? I mean,
it was terrible. If I had watched it at home with some friends and we were
so
just as a goof, I actually went to the theater and saw that piece of crap.
You watched Sharknado. I mean, would you?
But see, that was intentionally bad.
Okay,
that was intentionally bad.
Okay,
and I watched it, and I didn't pay $9 to see it.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got nothing else. I mean, I got plenty. I can do a Google search real quick and get you something, but this is a long episode.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. So
this is almost as long as the Super Bowl.
We talked about chopping this one up because we knew it was going to be long.
We did.
And honestly, we will talk more on it because I mean, plenty of episodes to come on this topic, or at least another one.
Over the coming months.
So we decided, not chop this one up, keep it at whole, and just listen to it. It's a long one, but
so you can listen to it in segments.
Listen to it however
We've
you
broken
want to.
it up into 4 or 5 different segments with song breaks and everything. Listen from one song break to the next, but hopefully you enjoy it.
Tell you what, the Boomer and X workout program where you have to do cardio for the whole episode.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pick this episode.
No, don't pick this one. Don't pick this one.
I'm done, John. What you got anything else?
No, I think that's about it. I hope that somehow we have, from a political standpoint, on hey, let's look at and see what's going on with the races now, and try to put the current political climate in a bit of historical context. I hope we did that, and I hope with regards to global warming / climate change, I hope that the conversation about how the whole how the earth heats up and with the sun and the role that it plays onto the more advanced parts of the conversation, the more, the parts that actually have to deal with things changing and are we changing them. I hope it was educational. I hope it was informative. I hope it was entertaining.
We tried hitting both sides pretty good.
Yeah. So again, I don't know. We hopefully won't be 5 weeks before we're back for our next show. Won't. But if we are 2 or 3 weeks, you have plenty to listen to.
Sure do.
Of course, I'm putting this at the end, and you've already listened to it if you're hearing this.
Thanks for listening. I believe that's it. We will put links to pretty much everything in there. We've got to, we got to give credit to the people the music we use and stuff like that. So we'll do the same with the information. The intellectual information.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, sure. So everything's copyrighted these days, so everybody's got to get their due. And that's about it for me, John. I'm gonna tell y'all to go to the boomerandxshow.com. That's our website. We keep a list of our current episodes on there. You can get some contact us, send us an email, and tell me about all the stuff I got wrong, and maybe John got some stuff wrong in there. Y'all can call him out on it, and we look forward to that type of stuff. At Boomer and X Show on Twitter, you can do that also. And John, I'm done here.
Yep. Thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate you. Take care and be safe.